Cellist Marina Hasselberg has traveled a distinctive route that has variously led her through early music, free improvisation, the fringes of pop songcraft, electronics, contemporary chamber music, and an array of interdisciplinary collaborations that resist classification. Since making Vancouver her home, Hasselberg has become a fixture within an assortment of the city's musical communities, both strictly as a cellist and as a vital creative instigator. In 2016, she was the recipient of the City of Vancouver Mayor's Arts Award for Emerging Artist in Music. She was also the feature artist for Vancouver Pro Musica's 2017 Sonic Boom Music Festival, an event that culminated in a sold-out concert where she premiered 11 new works for cello and electronics. As the artistic director of Novo Ensemble, she has commissioned and presented numerous works, especially by Canadian creators. In 2016, the group was rated Best Classical Ensemble in the Vancouver is Awesome Readers' Poll. Hasselberg has served as the principal cellist of the Vancouver Island Symphony and enjoyed many collaborations in Vancouver and abroad. Her forthcoming album, Red, on Redshift Records, sees her insightful interpretive vision colliding with her improvisatory prowess. The album weaves together various compositions, everyone from Domenico Gabrielli to Linda Catlin-Smith, with her frequent collaborators Aaron Bajakian, Kenton Lowen, Giorgio Magnanensi, and Jesse Zubat. The Georgia Strait's Janet Smith wrote of Hasselberg that she has become a stand-up presence on Vancouver's music scene. And veteran writer Alex Vardy describes her as a spark plug in two very different musical worlds. Here's my interview with Marina Hasselberg. I'm your host of the Redshift Radio podcast, Adrian Verdejo, broadcasting to you from my home studio in Vancouver, BC, on the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. Welcome, Marina. Thank you so much for joining me today. It has been far too long since I've seen you. I think probably 6 months when I saw you just before you left for Germany. So thank you so much for stopping by today.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure. And yes, it has been a while. So it will be great to have a chance to catch up.
Well, welcome back to Vancouver. We're just talking about, some of the differences, maybe some of the changes that we've noticed in the certainly last year or so. You were in Germany. You said you also visited family in Portugal.
Mm-hmm.
And tell us a little bit about the concerts you were involved in, some of the musicians you played with, and how you found your homecoming after so many years.
Okay. So it was actually very interesting to have this trip and the festival show in Bremen, because I barely played any live concerts in the pandemic. I did some in the summer outdoors, but I was mostly focused on my own projects, composing and improvising at home on my own. So a very different experience. And pre-pandemic, I would do it all the time, right? So lots of live performance. But it had been a while, and then I got this invitation to go play with Josh Zubat's string quintet and a huge festival, jazz festival that happens in Germany called Jazz Ahead. And so that was the reason why I ended up traveling to Europe at that point. So this was late April 2022. And it was fantastic because I got there, and as I said, it's like a way bigger festival than what I expected. So very, very big. And it was very interesting to feel that energy again. I had spent a lot of time outside of Vancouver before that. So I was mostly in nature and not having much contact even with humans, let alone concerts and the art scene. So it was a very, in a way, very drastic reintroduction of live performance, but with that came a lot of that vibrant energy that we get when we perform or when we go to shows, and when there's so much happening around us and so much creativity and travel and meeting new people, all those things that, as you know, it's there's a lot of beauty in it. It's very inspiring. It can be very tiring too. There's a whole other side of things, but it's quite precious. So it was beautiful to have that experience, to go there. I also traveled without my cello, which was an interesting experience this time. So, and that brought its own kind of little adventures, since I basically, when I travel with my cello, I have to pay for a ticket for my cello, so it travels in a seat next to mine. But this time that was not the case. So the festival actually decided to rent a cello for me. But I decided to bring my own bow, since at least I have something that's familiar. And my bow case is red, which makes it helpful to not lose track of it. Yeah. But I usually don't use it because my cello case has a place for the bow. Anyway, so I did end up losing my bow in the way there.
Oh, no.
Yes, I kind of knew it was probably going to happen. It's a long flight, two different flights, in fact. And so I wrapped my purse around the bow case on the first flight just to make sure, because I knew I wouldn't forget that way. And then I didn't think more about it. I had this kind of like moment going to the second flight where I was like, I feel lighter than I feel like it's easy to carry my things now, but I didn't think much of it. And then I was in fact already in Bremen for 2 days, I think, when I found the rosin.
Wow.
That was the trigger. I was like, interesting, where is my bow? So I wasn't able to locate it until I was going to get the cello the day after or something. And then that's when I started phone calls. Anyway, eventually decided to just rent a cello bow as well for the concert. So I played the concert with a different cello and a different bow, which is definitely very unusual for me. But it turned out to be super refreshing.
Yeah. Was it an older cello, or is it a kind of a modern cello?
It was a recent cello. I don't remember now the exact date, but let's say maybe it was 5 years old, something like that. So very recent. And I've been playing. My cello is antique. It's 150 years old. Very beautiful, very beautiful. But so it was really cool to play on a different instrument. I always play most of my concerts in this main cello that I have, and has been with me since I was, I think, 17 years old. So all of my career, let's put it like that, I used the same cello. So I had moments where I went to play in Yellowknife, and I played, in fact, in an ice castle. So I didn't want to use my cello, right? So then I used one of those carbon fiber cellos. But those I already know how they work. So this was just a beautiful, normal, made of wood cello in Germany, and turned out to be amazing, much easier to play, a fantastic sound, so much bigger. And to the point that I contacted the luthiers that had rented it out and to ask if it was for sale. And it was. So I went there, I tried the cello. The bow was from the same place, in fact. I also was interested in the bow. My bow, the bow I usually use, I've had it, I believe, since I was 13 years old.
Oh, wow.
So did most of my schooling and career with the same bow. So anyway, it was incredible. I was there, tried the cello again, tried the bow, making a decision. And then I look around, but this is a beautiful shop with tons of cellos outside of the cases, right? They're all in beautiful stands. So you are surrounded by them. So as you play, they actually kind of, you feel the resonance. They all, exactly. They all resonate. So it's really beautiful. But then I was like, well, I should try the other ones too, right? So then it's one of those things where it's just hard to put a stop to it. So I did fall in love with one of the other ones. Oh. So I decided to bring it back with me, the cello and the bow. The bow had ivory in it, which it makes everything very complicated in terms of touring and traveling with the bow. For very good reasons. But so the luthier warned me about it, and then we ended up deciding to replace that little piece. So I brought the bow with me, and then the cello. I couldn't bring it, but it was eventually sent on a huge card box and arrived about a month ago. So I have both with me. So that was a big souvenir I got from that, from that experience.
A nice souvenir from probably what was a pretty stressful experience, first losing your bow on the plane. I can imagine already having anxiety, going to the concert, learning all that music. Last time I saw you, you were in the process of learning this music in a short span of time.
Right.
Can you tell us a bit about the music and the programming?
Yes. So this quintet actually has been working for a few years. And I'm not the cellist from this group, so they usually play with Peggy Lee, who is a fantastic cellist in town. But I think Peggy I think this concert was rescheduled because of the pandemic, and the new date didn't work for Peggy, something like that. I don't know. So that's how I ended up getting involved. And yes, so they already knew the music. I had to learn the music, but it's it's beautiful music. So all by Josh Zubat. All his music, it's electrifying music, super energetic. Some of it's super fast. It's a fantastic balance between crunchy and smooth, let's put it like that. So you have lots of dissonance, but then you have the most beautiful lyrical passages as well. There is also a very good balance between written and improvised. And the group features not only Josh Zubat on violin, but also Jesse Zubat, so Josh's brother. They're both on violin, and Meredith Bates as well. And then James Meager on the bass. And then the cello. So it's actually super fun and rare to play in a group of just strings that is not a classical string quartet, So
absolutely,
that was fantastic. And the music was great. And there was a little of, we were wondering, because the festival is a jazz festival, but a little more conservative, I would say, in general, than the music we were going to present. But it ended up being fantastic. So super well received, to a very enthusiastic full house. It was quite magical.
That's fantastic. And I imagine also after a couple of years of pandemic and shutdowns that the audiences like here were very eager to get back into the live venue and really appreciated, that interaction with you all, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was really beautiful. I think all of us, both performers and audience members, had enough of the online concert experience, and it's not the same. I think it really just made it clear on how much we feed from each other. The audience plays a huge role on live performance, right? And sometimes we forget about it. It's the artist's job, but it's not. Like, an artist without the audience cannot do the job to the same level. And it's not as fun, obviously. So it was very interesting we were actually kind of surrounded, like on three sides of the stage there was audience, right? So it felt like a really close connection with the people there. It was fantastic. Yeah, it was fantastic. And very close. The people were very close, which is something I love as a performer. I don't like to have the audience really far away from the stage. It felt very warm. It felt like a shared experience. It was beautiful.
Oh, beautiful. And of course, Jesse Zubat is a collaborator of yours, and of course, you worked closely with him on the production of your most recent album. And I do want to talk about this album entitled Red. Off mic, we've been talking quite a bit about it, and I know you've been kind of producing this over the past few years, and it seems somewhat like a culmination of your various practices as a Baroque musician, as a quote-unquote traditional cellist in the classical realm, and this kind of new direction that you've been seemingly moving in the last few years of improvisation, working with electronics, and of course heavy collaboration with various close collaborators such as Jesse, our mutual friend Giorgio, and various other musicians and composers. So please tell us a little bit about the inspiration for the album, including the title for the album. I was going to ask what your favorite color is, but I think I have the answer. But I'm still curious to know about the production of the album, how it came about, and if you had this particular assortment of pieces in mind, or if it just sort of fell into place.
First of all, yes, I'm super, super excited about this upcoming release. It's my debut album, so it's the first time I'm going through this process that is actually very rich, very complex of bringing this album to life. So it's been already a few years, and it changed. The idea changed a lot with time. So I'm one of those people that is always moving from one thing to another. So I rarely keep an idea for a long time. And I think that's also why I played lots of different types of music. I need to just be exploring. So I believe the first time, let's see, I think the official beginning of the process was applying for grants for this album. So once I had the idea of what I want to do, and that was probably in 2017. So it has been a while. And then at the time I wanted to do mostly an album of other people's compositions. That was the idea.
Pieces you commissioned over the years and had premiered.
Exactly. A combination of pieces that I had already played and others I hadn't. And I believe it was supposed to be absolutely solo, so just cello. Anyway, it has been through so many phases, so it's hard to even remember right now. But then things started changing because I changed as an artist, right? As a human, like that's a long time ago. So I started doing way more improv in my life, and so that ended up becoming a big part of the album. I also remember that so the album was recorded in 2020, and then I had a very specific idea of what I wanted a few months before the recording sessions, which was an album that would be meant to be listened to when you are alone in your home. So being like you're having a bath, or you are, doing like little things in the house, organizing things, doing your laundry, or doing the dishes, like something very natural, but that would give you a feeling of coziness, almost as if you had a cellist playing quietly next to you when you are alone at home at night or sunset time. And so it was supposed to be a pretty acoustic experience. Like I was even thinking about having like a mic very close to the cello. Just experimenting with all those ideas. And then what happened was things kept changing, and I was thinking maybe I want to have some guests joining me. Maybe I'll do a little improv. And then I remember the morning of the first recording session thinking, that's not what I want to do. I have all this energy inside of me, and this is going to be a crazy album. I think that was the word I was having in my mind. It's not a beautiful acoustic experience for when you're alone at home, casually doing tasks anymore. I have way too much energy inside of me right now. That's not what I want to communicate. And so that was the day of, right? That was just before we were about to start recording. And so that's what the album is, actually. It's no longer any of those initial ideas. It's a combination of many things. It still includes written pieces by other people. So some of those pieces that were either written for me or that had been commissioned by someone else, but I really liked and started playing. So it has 4 written pieces. And then the rest of the album is made of improvisations that link those pieces, so create a unit altogether. And so for most of the improvisations, I have guest improvisers playing with me, and they are Aram Bajakian, Kenton Lowen, Giorgio Magnanenzi, and Jesse Zubat. And then the written pieces are quite varied, actually, because the first one, the one that opens the album, is one of the very first pieces written for solo cello. So it's the composer is Gabrielli, and the piece is called Ricercare Primo, because he wrote several Ricercari. So this is the first one. It's very beautiful and very strange. So the word Ricercare kind of means to search for, to look for something. So they are written, but they sound a bit improvised. So they sound very free. This one doesn't have a structure, doesn't have like 8-bar phrases, nothing like that. It's just very free, very beautiful. And so that was written for Baroque cello. I did play it on a modern cello in this album. Yes, there is Baroque cello in this album, but not on this piece.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that is the initial track of the album, written piece by Gabrielli. So from a Baroque composer.
Very symbolic that it's such an early piece, the first piece on your first album, and that's sort of like a step, the first step in your journey as a recording artist, perhaps.
Yes.
And really kind of opening the door. Also, that it's kind of a little bit, like you said, unusual in its form and its language. Can I ask you, as a traditionally trained classical musician, in that sense, I know we talked about your upbringing in the conservatories, and of course, when I first met you, I mean, you were playing as an orchestral musician, also, in chamber music as a soloist, teaching classical music, as as many cellists do, and you eventually, it seemed like, adopted improvisation as another kind of extra practice, and obviously it's a big part of your kind of musical identity now. How was it that sort of was introduced to you, or did you kind of have this feeling, like you said, when you thought about the album, you sort of changed your mind? Did you sort of have this freeing moment, or sort of an inspiration one day that you have this kind of voice inside of you that has to come out, that we feel like sometimes we're sort of bound to the written page as classical musicians? Can you tell us about that as an improviser, Marina?
Definitely. So I started learning music in a very traditional classical school. So there was absolutely no improvisation going on, right?
This was in Portugal?
In Portugal, exactly. So south of Portugal, in a city called Évora. Very, very old city that even has like Roman temples and all. It's an incredible place. So that is where I was living at the time with my family. And so I was 11 when I started playing, which is quite old for a cellist. But it was what we called there a professional music school. So it's very intense. Instead of going to a normal school and then going to a music academy, you just do everything in the same place. So it's very, very focused on music. So anyway, it was very, very classically focused. But and I enjoyed it. It was very hard work, but I liked it. But I always felt there is... I would never feel fully a musician if I couldn't make my own music. Because there's a lot a performer can do, of course, when interpreting a written work written by someone else. Definitely. But it's still not your notes, right?
Yeah.
It's still someone else's work. So as you know, classical music is so challenging. So there wasn't like space that I could do it on the side, start composing or improvising. There was no space, time for anything. So it took all this time to finally get to it. And I'm trying to remember exactly when the transition happened. So basically, I always wanted to explore what my musical voice is, being it through composition or improvisation. So improvisation, it comes more naturally, right? And so that was the start. And I believe that it was thanks to Giorgio, actually. Giorgio asked me a while back, "Hey, Marina, I'm going to play at my friend's place tonight. I think it was an art opening or something. Would you like to join me?" And I was like, yes. I was terrified, but I did go. I remember going to Long and McQuaid, get a pickup, because Giorgio was going to put effects on my sound. And that was it. That was the first time. And I loved it. It was so freeing. I remember just playing like long tones, beautiful sounds, and Giorgio was just affecting them. Giorgio was using his wooden resonators,
the cedar plank resonators,
and he makes it so beautiful. So it was just an incredible experience, and then I just never wanted to stop, because it's more like a honest conversation. You are sharing your thoughts, your feelings, instead of trying to interpret others.
Totally. And as an educator and as a composer and a collaborator, Giorgio is so gifted at kind of, opening the door to this language of, experimental music or, avant-garde music, improvised music, however you want to say it, and making it really accessible in a way, very inviting, I think also, both for the performer and for the audience.
He is. He's one of those people that connects the dots and makes the links, right? So he's, I think, a very, very special person to have here in our BC, British Columbia community, that connects people from all kinds of scenes, young, old, experienced, less experienced, amateur, professional. It's truly a treasure.
Can you tell us about the works on the album specifically involving Giorgio, and also I'm interested in how your improvisations are structured? I mean, there are completely free improvisations where we kind of sometimes meet and just like whatever. Other times there's sort of like a map or a kind of a general idea or just some sort of vibe. And I'm wondering how you collaborated with these musicians and composers on the album. Did you have a plan going in, or was it just whatever?
It was completely free. No structure, no goals, no timings. It was literally playing with them, and then and while recording. And then what happened is Jesse Zubat is the producer. So after the recording sessions, then together with Jesse, we chose the material we would like to include in the album. But yes, there are no rules, there are no structures. The improv parts are literally fully improvised. So there is no written anything. So yeah, they couldn't be more true, more real, more honest.
And then also, I mean, you had played obviously with Giorgio, and I assume with some of the other musicians, there is this kind of relationship that develops, right? You sort of get to know psychically, how to play off somebody, what to expect. I think also every day people are in different moods and have these different energies, right?
Exactly.
So you sort of bring that into the recording session, I imagine.
Yeah.
Were there multiple takes of some of these pieces and you sort of, that's the one, or?
Of the improvisations?
Yeah.
No. I mean, yes, in the sense that we were improvising continuously for a long time, right? Or sometimes, that each improvisation would have its own beginning and end, but we'll keep recording. But there was no, I wouldn't say there were like many takes in the sense that let's try to do this again. It's just next, let's do what we feel like, and then I chose some. In fact, there are so many that I actually really loved that there is a second album coming out eventually. Yeah. It's not planned yet, with just improvs from those same sessions.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. So that will be, this one is more cello focused. So the improvisations that had a bit more of featuring the cello kind of thing are in this album. And then the other album is going to be only improvised music, so no written pieces, and it's going to be more of like an ensemble vibe going on.
Wonderful.
Yes, those were fruitful sessions for sure.
Yeah.
It was lovely. And again, like these are all fantastic improvisers, right? So it's just a pleasure to share the space in the studio with them and just see what happens. It's like a trip, honestly. You don't know what's going to happen. As you said, when we improvise, everything counts, right? The mood you're in, what happened that morning before you came to the studio, or if it was easy to park your car or not, or if there was a beautiful bird on the way or not, like the space itself, everything affects what's happening musically. So it's a very beautiful experience, in opposition to playing a classical piece that we've played many times. It's always going to be a little different, but not to this extent. So yeah, it's honestly really enjoyable to just share music and just play and see what happens without a plan.
It's a very pure and very honest way, and I think this is the take, and this is what it was in the moment. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And something is very different from, like you said, the typical rehearsal process of a classical musician. And you have spent many years as a chamber musician, collaborating with so many people in the city, as well as a cellist. In that regard, can you tell us about the composed pieces? There's a few very well-known composers, including Linda Catlin Smith, who I know this is a pre-existing work for cello.
Yes.
Can you start by telling us about that work, please?
Yes. So I think I met Linda in Vancouver when a local organization was presenting her music, maybe Turning Point Ensemble, but I'm not 100% sure. And so she was visiting to, don't know if it was a premiere. Oh, I do remember. Vancouver New Music. That's it. Vancouver New Music put together a concert for string orchestra performing new music, and one of the pieces we played, so I was invited to be a cellist in that concert, and one of the pieces was by Linda, and that was the first time I played her music, and I fell in love. It was so beautiful, so incredible, so moving. Actually, I don't remember the name of the piece right now, but it was absolutely stunning. So then I got curious about her music and who Linda is. I think we have lots of friends in common, so I knew of her. But then I think maybe when she came to town, possibly because of Turning Point, then we talked, and she kindly shared this piece that she had written recently, also for Baroque cello, even though I also didn't play it on Baroque cello on this album with her permission. So yeah, it's a piece for Baroque cello. It's clearly new music, but there are moments where it could be Baroque. And it's also called Richard Carr. So there's a connection there with track number 1, which was Gabriele's Richard Carr. And so I haven't spent much time with Linda personally. We were in touch a little bit because of the album, but that's it. But she was very, she gave me a lot of freedom in the way I interpret it. So some composers are more like they want to know how you're going to play or tell you how to play it. And Linda was very flexible, very, very kind.
It shows a sign of trust in the performing artist.
I guess.
And what was the reason you chose to play it on modern cello as opposed to Baroque cello? Because we know that is actually a specialty of yours as a Baroque cellist.
Yeah, that's true. I do like playing Baroque cello a lot. And for me, sometimes there are pieces that I feel better playing on the modern cello, and other pieces that I feel better playing on the Baroque cello. And it's actually kind of funny because in this album, so 2 of the pieces were meant to be on Baroque cello, the 2 Richard Carr, but I play them on modern, and then one of my improvs, which also has electronics in it, I did it on the Baroque cello, right? So you would probably assume that it would be the other way around, but that's just how I felt, and so that's how I connected to those pieces. It was with those specific instruments.
From a kind of technical point of view, are there, I mean, obviously there's specific tactile and technical kind of adjustments you would make, I imagine, and perhaps even just from, the bow grip to the, the left-hand position, perhaps even just the physical body of the instrument, but it probably also timbrally as well would be a big decision of yours.
Yeah, they sound very different. So in a way, the basics, you approach them in the same way, the Baroque cello and the modern cello, but the gut strings, right, they give you a very warm sound, less projection, so less sound, but very warm, a little squeaky in a good way. But they feel very different on the fingers, for sure. The way you slide is very different. The tuning turns also to be very different. The bow has a different shape and is held differently, so which affects the articulation a lot, and again the projection as well. So there are no doubt lots of differences. And sometimes I cannot explain it. I can play a piece on both cellos and feel like, okay, this is the cello I want to use for this piece.
Some of these pieces originated when you were, I think, guest artist at the Sonic Boom some years ago. Am I mistaken?
Yes. No, you are so right.
I think the piece by Martin, is that correct? Tell us about the origins of this piece. I know that there's a lot of kind of interesting extended techniques in this work, also some very complicated rhythmic features, which, I'm sure was, it's very impressive and very virtuosic. Please tell us about the origin of this composition and your work with Martin.
Yes. So, Martin, let's see. I'm trying to remember if I already knew Martin before that concert. Basically, that show you mentioned it was a call for scores for cello, solo cello, so for myself, and I think we ended up premiering 11 works. So it was a long program, but it was very beautiful because I got to meet a lot of lovely composers and got to experiment with them a little bit too. Some pieces were actually presented to me finished, and others were more like, Marina, can we do this? I would like the sound. Can you do that on the cello? That kind of more collaborative work. Obviously, the pieces were fully written by them, but more of like trying things together, that kind of thing. So Martin had already, I believe he had already written this piece even before the call for scores. He had it ready. I believe. Yeah, I believe so. Anyway, Martin plays the cello. So he's not only a wonderful composer, he's also a cellist, and he sings and he writes, and he's also a calligrapher. He does he's a beautiful artist, beautiful human, someone that I find, I think he's really, really special. And this piece is extremely challenging. It doesn't require the use of any electronics or truly any crazy extended techniques, but I do have to pluck the strings with my left hand, which is usually reserved to stop the strings, so press the place where I want to get a pitch. But in this piece, I do have to do both. So the thumb on the cello in most neck positions is not doing any work. So basically, I have 4 fingers, 4 options, and so at least. Oh, and it's double stop, so I play 2 notes at once. So I guess 3 of my fingers will be working, but there are shifts, and the rhythm is very tight and continuous and complex. So it's definitely challenging, but really, really inspiring. I adored that piece from the first moment I tried it, even when I couldn't play it yet, right? But it's very, very beautiful, very special, very original. I had never seen any piece like this for cello. And so even though I have to invest a lot of time to learn it, I'm just, obviously I love it. Otherwise I would not have included it on the album. I absolutely adored it. So yeah, that was the beginning of the connection with Martin there. And then I ended up really wanting to include it in the album.
The title is Where the Sand is Hot? Is that the title?
No, It is At a Distance. So I believe that this piece was written.
I was looking at the wrong 2B, actually. It's in the side B 2B.
Sorry. Yeah,
I think
it's for the vinyl, exactly, the 2 sides.
It's clever titling and also the arrangement of the pieces. I do want to talk about the vinyl itself, because obviously the physical format limits the time, and I'm not sure if that was a reason why you have this kind of secondary album of improvisations, but it must have been tough to really kind of narrow down your choice of pieces for this. You mentioned this kind of intimate quality, and it's so beautiful. I'm looking at the album right now, and it's just a beautiful, clean album cover, beautiful imaging, and it has this, I think the physical nature of vinyl has that kind of warmth and depth to it, right? It's great to see that vinyl is making a resurgence. And was that really one of the first things that you had in mind, that you wanted a vinyl album?
Not at all. No. So when I first thought of this, it was going to be digital and in CD as well. And again, Giorgio keeps coming up. I think it was Giorgio. Marina, why don't you make a vinyl too? I was like, really? I love the sound of vinyl, but I don't have a record player. I used to at home when I was growing up, but no longer have one. So I'm not connected to the idea of a physical record on a daily basis. So Giorgio brought it up. I was like, maybe. And so I think exactly that was after we recorded it. So actually Jesse Zubat had to be the magician of making it fit into a vinyl after we had already chosen the pieces and the material that was coming, that was going to become red. So he did his tricks, and thanks to that, now I get to have a record, which is fantastic.
And will you be getting a turntable at some point?
Yes. Yeah. I did get one. But I haven't been able to hook up all the parts yet. So I'll get there. Now that the album is out, I have no excuses. Yeah, it's not out yet, actually, but I have it in my hands. So I already have it.
The sneak preview, and the official release date is when?
October 21st, 2022.
Fantastic.
So coming up in a few weeks.
Oh, that's very exciting.
I am terribly excited.
And a huge relief. I'm sure I personally know what it's like to have this kind of thing hanging over your head for months and years sometimes, and just kind of it's like, wow, this is like a sort of endless consideration. And then just kind of having this, here it is. And I can kind of I'm putting this music into the world, and this is what it is for now. And, I'm still moving in this direction, and this is a kind of a snapshot of this time, of your artistic growth.
It's true.
Are you planning a release concert of some sort? Obviously, starting promoting the album. Will you be doing in-person concert?
So what I'm doing for now is I was invited by the Infidels to which is basically Tim runs this, curates these concerts under the name The Infidels in Vancouver, and they're jazz, but not only jazz. So this is not a jazz album. It's a unlabeled, I guess, unlabelable album. But anyway, so Tim invited me to play a show on October 16th, which is just a few days before the album release. So I'm going to call it a soft release, and it's a solo show, so I'll not have the guests that are in the album there with me. I'm just going to probably play 1 or 2 tracks of the album, and most likely the rest of the show is going to be improvised music. I'll figure it out in between now and then. Yeah. So I think that's the closest I have to a release right now. Possibly in the future I'll do a more how can I say, a release with the actual guests of the album. It's so beautiful. We'll see, but that would come later in the year.
It used to be like even a few years ago where you would want to do a vinyl album and it'd be kind of a novelty, like, it's like, oh, well, I have a kind of nostalgia for vinyl, and there's some of us people who have been collecting for a long time, but now actually vinyl has actually surpassed CDs in terms of digital, physical formats. And I wonder if that's kind of maybe a reflection of people, like we were talking earlier, wanting more of like physical reality, this kind of thing. Like I can have 1,000 tracks on Spotify and this sort of thing, but it still means something to have, and even with the artifacts of kind of like the hissing and this, sort of like the needle and this sort of thing, gives us this kind of, this personal, intimate connection to the format. And that also there's a particular warmth to the quality of the album as well.
That's true. Yeah. I would assume so. I feel so. I do not have a collection of records, right, as I was mentioning. So, but I do relate to the object. I love to touch a record, right, or a vinyl, or even looking at it. It's gorgeous, and but I feel like that on a daily basis with books, where I have that kind of a struggle where I don't want to fill in my house with things, but how can I just read books digitally? Like it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah, I agree. Totally.
It doesn't work. So yeah, I keep filling my house with books then.
Nice.
It's the object, right? It's beautiful. It's the paper, the texture, the smell. Like I love smelling books.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Right? So all those things, the marker. Yeah. Those are precious things. Same thing for the vinyls, or the needle of the record player, right? Absolutely. Or the cleaning of the vinyl, the sounds when it gets to the end, it does like click, that kind of thing. So those are all very precious.
It's a part of the ritual of the experience.
Exactly.
Right? In that same way. And I think, we did mention that, sort of the pandemic time, and, we all had to make adjustments and do these kind of online concerts. And, I think there's some growth that came out of that for a lot of artists, and sort of necessary in a way. But still, there's this hunger, like you said, for the human kind of interactive, and physical sort of process of that. And collecting books, I agree. It's like there was a time where I was moving around so much, and I used to have a bunch of books. I got rid of them because you have boxes of weight, with you. Yeah. But now I'm kind of like settling into like one place, and I want books. I want to have kind of these artifacts of, my favorite, memories of a past time, and sort of like they're just there, accessible at any point,
And you pass by them during the day, right? And that's inspiring. You're not necessarily going to stop what you're doing and take the book and read, but you could.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder of that beautiful thing that's right there, accessible to you.
Absolutely.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's a bit like having photographs, I guess, of the people you like in your home. Right?
Exactly. So, yeah. And there's a kind of, you cherish it more than, like a digital JPEG, and that it is going to fade with time. It's going to have sort of like bends and folds, and sort of like it will have the the same kind of marks that we all carry with us as humans too. We sort
it's
of like
true.
Get dinged up and folded up over the years.
Yeah, exactly. It's true. Maybe that's the case.
So I mentioned it at the beginning, Marina, but tell us about the title, Red. I think it's very kind of provocative in a certain way. It has this kind of intensity, even just sort of the font and the image and the logo itself. And I know you've used that title before, this idea of red in past concerts as well.
True.
Not sure if it was coincidentally, but what was the What was the inspiration for that title?
So you got it right that red is my favorite color. And I think because it's a vibrant color, but also because it's the color of our blood. And I don't mean it in any dramatic way, but it's this liquid flowing inside of us, right? So there is something about it for me. Yeah. And I find it a very also very direct color, right? There's no way you miss red, right? It's right there. And I guess that's why we use it in traffic lights, as you are not going to miss the fact that you have to stop right now. So it does speak to me. And then remember I was talking about the idea of the album, the initial idea changing, and then I just felt like, no, this is going to be a very real thing, very direct, very almost raw. This music, that decision I made on the day of the first session before starting the recording, and that's what Red is. So that's just how it turned out. I didn't plan it to be called Red. It was after the fact that I was like, what am I going to call this album? It's going to be called Red.
The piece by Craig Alders, Marina, was this part of the Sonic Boom batch of pieces you mentioned a while back, or is this a separately commissioned piece?
It is actually a similar story. Also, event presented by Vancouver Pro Musica. So, but I think before the Sonic Boom Festival. So their further series, I believe that's how I met Craig, a collaboration. Yes, so when I had Novo Ensemble, there was a concert featuring Novo Ensemble. Exactly. And so that's when I played Craig's piece, I believe, for the first time. It's a very, very beautiful piece. It's the last track of the album. Craig is also a local composer and performer, and also a beautiful human. There's so many beautiful people involved in this album. So we had played it a couple of years before, maybe 2015, but I'm not 100% sure, around there. That's probably when I performed it for the first time. And it's a piece that involves a back, like a track, basically, a tape, and that has sounds of Vancouver. It's really beautiful.
Oh, cool. I always love that we still call it tape, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. It feels odd. It is not a tape.
This is like anybody younger than 30 is like, what the hell is tape?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What is that? So it's basically like a digital track that I have to activate when I'm performing the piece, and then I play on top of it. So it's basically a background, and it's very beautiful, and it's very relaxing, actually. So the title of the piece is Things Fall Apart, and I believe that it was inspired by a moment in a time in Craig's life where he was dealing with or coming to terms with the end of a romantic relationship. And I think you can hear that when you hear this piece. It's very, very, it is beautiful, but melancholic. And I think it sounds like acceptance, like accepting something, an ending of a phase and a beginning of another. And it's a gorgeous piece. And I love it because the album is quite insane at times, especially on the improvs. And I really like at the end to finish with this very calm, long tone, kind of freestyle, beautiful, long track.
You press play and it goes, or are there parts where it comes in and out? Is it variable? Or?
No, it's just a long, it's longer than the cello part. So I actually activate it. Then I only start playing about a minute after.
Okay.
And then after I finish the cello part, it also stays for long. So it feels like a blanket, like the warmest, sweetest blanket. And then I get to lay on top of the blanket, right, to play the cello part on top.
Oh, beautiful.
So I would say it's a very pleasant track, very beautiful.
The group Novo was yourself, Laura Vanek, flutist, and there was a pianist also?
Yes, so that was Ji-Yeon Ryu.
and you performed as a trio for some time before. Mostly you, Laura, and a series of collaborators. You would have different guest artists and so forth.
Exactly. So we started as actually, in fact, Gian and Laura started together as a duo. They did the first concert, and then I went to the first concert, loved it, and they invited me to join. So then we called it Novo Ensemble. And then Gian ended up deciding to pursue more of an academic career, so she was not as available to perform. And so Laura and I took over.
Are you still in contact with Laura Vanek, flutist Laura Vanek?
Yes. In fact, I just went to hear her play a few days ago.
Oh.
She played a Mozart concerto for flute and harp with Albertina.
Oh.
Another local musician you probably are familiar
Albertina
with.
Chen.
Yes. Yeah. They played with the ensemble orchestra here in town, also I believe called Harmonia or Harmonia, depending. I don't know very well how they say it, but it's a very, very fun group, and the concert was fantastic.
Oh,
very, very beautiful. So yes, I'm very good friends with Laura, so we stay in touch, and yeah, it's really fun. But we don't play together that often, and I think it was about a month ago that Laura now has a group called No Chamber. And she organizes events, musical events, mostly in North Vancouver, and community-oriented. So it brings together often professional musicians and amateur musicians, mostly outdoor events. But I think they do Christmas concerts in an actual venue, so a church. Those are not outdoor because of the time of the year. But in the summer, lots of fun outside concerts. So she invited me to come join them, and that was so fun. It was
nice.
Yeah, it was really, really awesome. There was a young group of violin players or fiddle players that were a big part of the concert too. So it was beautiful.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yes, but thanks to that group with Laura, that it's true. That's how we first collaborated, I think, where you came to play with the two of us. So we planned this program of trios that was fantastic, and duos. I think we alternated, right?
Yeah, that's right. We played the Natalie duo for cello and guitar. It was a great piece. Yeah, very great piece.
It is fantastic.
You know, it's funny when we think about like all this music we've played and all these concerts we've played, and the amount of time, like we said, you know, how quickly, in some ways also slowly, you know, this time has passed. And revisiting these pieces and thinking about old friends, and that I know that recently on your trip you were back in Portugal for the first time in some years, and you know, similarly when I go home, and you know, it has been a while for me too, it makes me very aware of the passage of time in a kind of bittersweet way a lot of the time. How did you find it being back with family, and do you have close friends that you still see in Portugal as well?
Yeah, so it turned out to be a really good visit. I had not been for 5 years. I left Portugal to come to Canada 14 years ago, so in 2008, to go to university in Ontario. And so I had been going every 2 years or so, but yeah, never such a long time of 5 years without going back. So I believe that only once in one of my visits in 14 years that I saw some friends, because I usually go for 2-3 weeks. Part of that gets eaten, let's call it, by the jet lag. At least for me, I really like my sleep and I need to rest in order to be present for myself and others and have a good time. So I really want to spend time with my family. And even though I have beautiful friends, some of them I'm still in touch with online, right? Or calls, texts, all that. But I rarely see my Portuguese friends in person. But I do have amazing siblings. I have 5 siblings. And together with my mom, that for me, it's what constitutes my close family. So when I go, I want to spend all the time I can with them, and they all live in slightly different places. So it's not like I can be with all of them at the same time. So I have 2 to 3 weeks to jump around and just make sure I see everyone. I try to see them at least 2 times each. And sometimes we manage to be all together. It's difficult, but at least once every trip we try to do that. So it's just really beautiful to see them. And yes, 5 years is a lot, especially with the pandemic in between, which forced growth and change, I think, in a lot of people. or fostered instead of forced, but depends on the case, honestly.
Totally.
Yeah. So there were lots of changes, and my youngest sibling, my brother Jan, for instance. So he was a young adult last time I went. I'm trying to think if he was 20 or 21, and I think now he was 25, 26, maybe turned 25. So it makes a big difference, right? This is now an actual adult.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very interesting to see that side of him.
Wow.
So there are some precious things like this that happen. They're very beautiful. And yeah.
You have a brother also who's a professional musician, I think, a bass player, is that right?
Yes,
is he still in Portugal?
João is still in Portugal. I actually jokingly said, when are you moving to Canada, just this past week? And he said, it's time to move again, isn't it? Because he has lived in many places too, but he has been in Portugal for, I don't know, maybe 8 years or so. Or I'm honestly not quite sure. But right now, he's all of my siblings are in Portugal except for Carmen, who is in Spain, in Barcelona. Good city, right? If you're going to be outside of Portugal, go to a cool place, which is the case. So I love them all. They're all very different. One is a professional musician. Jan, I believe, played some music too, but they all do different things. And João started more on the jazz side. But it's fun. It's very interesting how I was starting classical, he was starting jazz, and we're about 1.5 years apart, so we're close in age. And then now we finally are doing similar things because we both improvise, we both love electronics and pedals and effects, and it's like finally we can play together, actually. It hasn't happened because when I travel there, I don't usually have my cello. Even this time, I didn't have the cello because I played on a rental cello there. So yeah, it's just very beautiful to see how things evolve. And it's great that with one of my siblings, at least I can talk about pretty complex musical ideas and share ideas. And his music is beautiful. Marina Hasselberg, you can check online.
Do you have concrete plans to collaborate with him at some point?
Not concrete plans, but definitely it must happen. We've talked about it in the past. We tried to organize things, but then there's never. It's not that easy for me to get there, to be honest. Yeah. And then he has a busy life there too. So I really hope that next time.
Definitely get him to come to Vancouver, I think.
Exactly, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. Could always use more bass players.
Exactly. And he's cool. He's really cool.
Yeah.
He's a good one.
Very cool. Well, Marina, I want to thank you so much for stopping by. It was great to catch up with you in person and hear more about the album. Congratulations on the album. It's beautiful. And I wish you all the best with the release and with all the promotional aspects of it. It's a big achievement, and I know that it's going to be very special. So I look forward to hearing you perform, perhaps for the release concert. If not, we'll check out your website and we'll check out your upcoming dates. But thank you so much again.
Thank you, Adrian. It was a pleasure. Bye.